morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Mariani. I'm the Assistant Director of Operations for the Department of Permits, Licensing, and Inspections. Thank you all for coming this morning. I was speaking with my colleagues earlier this week, and we only have an hour here, and I could stand up here and talk about demolition for like 8 hours and not repeat myself. So my thoughts were is I will give you a kind of a basic structure of how things operate, where to find information, kind of essential things that you'll need to kind of navigate this if you needed to. The operations unit of the department handles all of the maintenance. So we have the construction side, we have the operation side, we have the business licensing side. The operation side handles all the maintenance. So it includes demolition, it includes property maintenance, fire maintenance, and it includes occupancy inspections, occupancy maintenance. For the purposes of this conversation, we are going to talk about city-sponsored demolition. So there's a big difference between private demolitions and city-sponsored demolitions. And when I say city-sponsored demolitions, I mean demolitions that are funded by the city. They're paid for by the city. These are different in that we don't have essentially a plan review process like they do on the private side. Like if you want to knock down your garage, you come in, you file an application, you set up a plan, it goes through plan review, there's a 15-day waiting period, and then the demolition is handled by whoever you hire to do it. On the cases of public demolitions or city-sponsored demolitions, the entire process goes through the department. It's handled by myself and my colleague, Corey Derrico. We are acquiring a couple of new individuals to help us with this, and Corey is the latest addition. So he's the one that's going to be working directly with all of the accounts for the city. We have, over the past 3 years, taken the actual demolition process and changed and renovated the entire thing. The pre-qualified contract that demolition contractors had been on for the past 2 decades was old. There were processes in there that didn't exist anymore. There were processes that didn't make any sense anymore. So our first duty we were kind of charged with was to update the pre-qualified contract that these demolition contractors apply for and work through. So it took us, myself, Maura, the rest of the department, other cities, we got other demolition contracts and individuals come in, and we put a new contract together that is a contemporary set of rules and regulations for individuals to follow that are going to work for us. Individuals that do demolitions for the city have to be on the pre-qualified contract. Somebody can't just walk off the street and say, I'm going to go do demolitions for the city. They have to go through the pre-qualified contract. That is an application process through procurement. They fill out, they have insurance requirements, they have different requirements when it comes to how they conduct business, where they conduct business, of course it's in the city, and then reference requirements. Procurement does a review of the application for each demolition contractor, then the applications come to our department and I do reference reviews on each one of them. I do municipal reference reviews, I do EPA reviews, and I do health department reviews. And when I go to them and everything comes back, the application is then sent back to procurement. The individuals then are on the pre-qualified contract. They are eligible to do demolition work for the city. And what that means is when I get a list of structures that have to be raised, I send it to these individuals and then they bid on each one independently. We have gone through a great amount of change to get to the point where we're at right now. We are running it much more efficiently than has been run in the past. We have quite a few less individuals overseeing this. Before, this used to be a whole separate unit, just demolition with the department. It has now been absorbed into operations, and because we have amended processes and got more efficient with it, we need fewer people to do it. And like I said, Corey Derrico, he also runs, he's the fire inspection supervisor. He's going to be overseeing the demolition for us. So with that said, like I said, I can stand up here and talk forever. If you do have a question, you can jump in, but I'm going to start describing a little bit more of the structure and how this operates and how we end up getting to this point in getting a building from condemnation to raised. So some of the confusion about this entire process is when a structure is condemned. I want to put a lot of emphasis on this. When a structure is condemned, that does not mean it's going to be razed. Razed is the technical term for demolishing a structure. So I'm going to work that in and out each time. So when I say it's razed, that means the building has been razed or it's going to be razed. When a property is condemned, it can be condemned for a various amount of reasons. It can be unfit for human occupancy, it can be an unsafe structure, it can be a hazard. I can condemn a piece of equipment inside of a structure, making it condemnable. I'll give you an example. If the gas company goes in and they red tag a house that there's a gas leak in there, I can condemn that house based on that gas leak. I'm actually condemning a piece of equipment, maybe the forced air furnace or that system in the house. So the entire structure is condemned, but it's not going to be razed. But it also, under condemnation, structures are not inhabitable. So once it's condemned, individuals are not allowed to inhabit a structure. Another simple one is if the water service is shut off on a structure, we'll stick with houses. If it's a $10 million home and the water service is shut off, it is condemned. Individuals are not allowed to live in a house without water service. That creates a sanitary situation. The water is the vehicle to remove sanitary content from the house. If it's not there, you can't inhabit the house. It's a very simple process. People don't understand it. I'm not going to get into some of the other details of what happens in homes when they don't have water service, but it is, it's true, it happens, but those are some of the simple reasons why things are condemned. Property or structure can be condemned based on if it's going to be taken through powers of eminent domain. The city wants to put up a school. We need to take down these 3 houses. The houses are condemned. They can no longer be inhabited. We're going to absorb them in. We're going to raise the structures. Another thing you may have also seen on the news, and it is commonplace in this area, a structure or a home being condemned because of a landslide. Now, we have multiple landslides going on right now. Beachview Boulevard has been on the news for quite some time. We condemned 6 single-family homes over there that they're not allowed to inhabit those homes because the landslide is directly behind them. We can't say with 100% certainty that those structures are safe or they're not going to go over the hill. So under that condemnation status, nobody's allowed to inhabit them. Do they have everything to inhabit them? Yes, but we can't be 100% sure that they're not going to fall over the hill. So with that said, the condemnation status does not dictate that the house or structure is going to be demolished. It could be condemned, it could be on the condemnation list for 30 years if it's structurally sound. People abandon homes. Water services get shut off, any type of thing. So the condemnation is one of the things I wanted to be perfectly clear, because people will see a house being condemned and they'll say, oh, it's going to be torn down here shortly, and that's not the case. So a little bit more about the structure. We have, over the past 3 years, when we've been changing and renovating this system, inventory management with these structures is one of the most important aspects of this entire thing. What do we have? What do we have to deal with? What are the derelict homes? What are the abandoned homes? What are the structurally unsound homes? What is our inventory? What are we dealing with? So this is kind of the segue that I was going to talk about. We're going to get to the website right here. Everything with city-sponsored demolition is on the website. You never have to call and ask. You don't have to track anybody down. I publish every single thing, every single aspect of city demolition. On our city webpage right here, we have, under city demolition information on the right-hand side, I publish these 3 charts right here: raised, under contract, and condemned. That is quite literally all of the information when it comes to city-sponsored demolitions. Julie, can you open up the condemned sheet? So this condemned sheet is everything that is condemned currently, that the way I understand it, and the way our inspectors in the fields understand it, and the way the rest of our staff understand it. I was preparing somebody to say, well, this house next to me is a dump and it's not on that list. So I have spent about 2.5 years. I inherited this list. It had about 1,600 structures on it. After I went through and confirmed it, we ended up with about 900. So that's how many mistakes were on this when I inherited it. So this is a constant, everyday inventory that I go over to make sure that it's correct. it's inherently important that we understand the inventory. If we don't have a grasp or hold on what we have, it's going to be impossible to conduct the business the way we need to. So when you look at this, this is the street address, the ward it's in, lot and block, and the date it was condemned. Now, like I said, somebody could have their water service shut off, the property's condemned, it ends up on this, they have their water service turned back on, a month later, it's off the list. And you can also see on this list, there's stuff that goes back to 1999 on here, 1991. Those homes or structures may be structurally sound, but they're abandoned or they're waiting for renovation or anything to that effect. So when you look at this list, it is not necessarily that these structures are going to be raised, and that's not the goal of this program either. The goal of the program is to find individuals that are responsible or find individuals that can be responsible to renovate these. The city doesn't need more vacant lots. Demolishing structures and then not improving that property afterwards is a gross misuse of money. I may have said that a little bit wrong, but if you're taking something down and you're not putting something back, and we're spending tax dollars to do it, what did you end up with? So the goal is not to go out and demolish homes or raise neighborhoods or anything to that effect. We take things and put them under contract that are imminently dangerous of collapse. So they can stay on the condemn sheet for quite some time. Like I said, they could be on there for 20 years. I'll give you an example. The home that I purchased was condemned by the county like 6 or 7 years ago. But it was never condemned by the city. It never appeared on the sheet. And by happen chance, I ran into the lady that owned it, and she had abandoned it 5 years before. But it was never on here. It should have been condemned, but it was never condemned by us. So this inventory is incredibly important about how it works and what gets on that list. So talking a little bit more about the list and staffing, we brought on Corey to work directly with the inspectors. Now I'm saying inspectors plural, but we don't have inspectors plural currently. We have one individual that goes out and is working with me to handle this inventory, track the inventory, post it. We do have 2 spots open. We're going to bring 2 more individuals on, and hopefully within about 6-9 months, I will have a great control over the inventory. I'm very confident in this inventory the way it stands right now, but I need a couple more boots on the ground, and I have them coming, so that's going to help greatly. So with this, I don't want to get too far down the line without explaining what you see over to my left over here. So the condemnation list is posted on the city website. You can go there, see it anytime, look at it. It changes every Friday. Now I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow, so I'm going to send the updates today. So I go through and I constantly update this sheet, and then I send it over, and then it gets posted up. But it's every Friday with new information, and you may look at that sheet up and down and not see anything different. I may have only changed one property. I get almost as many properties being renovated and taken off of this list as I do putting on it. Yesterday, the inspector brought me 4 properties that were recently renovated, now occupied. They came off the list. They handed me the next stack was 5 that went on it. So that's how fast it can happen. So this list constantly changes, it's constantly updated, but your first point of reference would be this. If you're wondering if something's condemned, it's condemned here. We do take one other spot. I take these and I go into our permitting software, and they do get tagged in the permitting software. So if somebody comes in and owns one of these properties and they want to file a building permit to renovate, they have to file a building permit to abate condemnation. So whatever the condition was that put that structure in that status, then they have to file a permit to pull it out of that status specifically. And then the building inspectors then monitor that. So with that said, Julie, could you move to the under contract? Yeah. So this is the next sheet on here. Let me back up a little bit. I think I'm going to incorporate this at the same time. When a structure is condemned, the inspector goes into the field, and this is a placarding system that we use for these properties. When a structure is condemned, this placard gets put on it. It's blue. You now know, you see it from the street, the property is condemned. It can be condemned for any one of the different code sections that are on here. It goes all the way from unsafe structure, unsafe equipment, unfit for human occupancy, unlawful structure, imminent danger, or vacant structures. So when you see this placard go up, it's going to appear on the condemned sheet shortly thereafter, usually within about 2 weeks. It will be on the list. So our inspector goes out, puts up this placard, comes back in next day, 2 days later, 3 days later, and then I work to get that inventory put onto the condemned sheet. So I jumped ahead a little bit here. So when you see this, this means that the property is condemned. It does not mean that, right, it's going to be demolished. It doesn't mean it's going to be demolished. It does mean that it's condemned. So moving on to this next placard, this next sheet that we're going to go to, which is under contract. The process for raising a structure, it gets condemned, it goes to imminent danger, and then moves on to the final one. This sheet that you see here under contract, these are properties that we were in the condemned status, got asbestos surveys done on them, and then were put out to bid. So this very first one at the top, where's our address? On there. Did I take the address off there? Anyway, so if you go across there, you can see oh, that's a good one, 1929 Brighton Road. 1929 Brighton Road was a city structure purchased back in the day. It's also part of a larger parcel that is encompassed by the Pittsburgh school system. That structure was a party wall structure that was condemned, when was that condemned? 2014. So it sat until 3 weeks ago to be demolished. 5 Star is the company that was awarded that contract. We had about 8 contractors submit bids for this property. 5 Star was the lowest. They came in at $75,000. Now this is a single family home that is a party wall. It's connected, it shares one wall with another house. It wouldn't have come in at this price if it wasn't for topographical issues, big hills, being attached to another property and having to be taken apart by hand so that the remaining property stays, that existing property remains. This also now, with a change in the system and processes, we now finish remaining party walls. It's part of the contract. In the past, we demolish a party wall, and then the remaining structure, it's that owner's responsibility to fix their wall. And that's the way it's always been, but we're getting a tremendous amount of blowback from properties migrating into bad weather, these walls not being finished, existing property owners not having the resources to finish these walls. So we took a step forward, and we're going to encompass into the contract the wall being finished by the contractor. So the demolition contractor took down 1929, and in his $75,000 is also the cost to rebuild that wall for the remaining structure. And this just by chance happened to be an anomaly that we got into where there were foundation issues underground, stuff that couldn't be foreseen to put into the contract. So this contractor bid this based on repairing the wall, and now we found foundation issues and everything with the existing home. So that opens up another avenue where we have to do a change order in the field. Not to get down into that, it's just with a specific account. But most of the party wall structures do come out. We've had several of them now that we've done that were done with the contract money, done correctly, done right, and the remaining structures are finished. And that is to the delight of the individuals that do own those properties. They didn't have to directly pay for it, and it's done right on the spot. And one of the hooks in the past was a demolition contractor doing something and then time being extended before that's being resolved. So the demolition contractor that gets that doesn't get paid until that wall is finished. So they raise the structure, finish the wall, and there is a separate building permit that is issued for the restoration of that wall. So there's the permit to raise the structure and then a separate building permit to do the restoration of the wall. So with that said, this right now is currently what we have under contract to be raised. You'll start seeing this go down. This will go down relatively quick. Now, with the change of policies and processes over the past year, we used to write contracts or bid agreements, if you will, bid agreement for 60 days if the building didn't require an asbestos abatement or asbestos application on it. Anything that had asbestos got a 90-day contract. So you'll see everything up there now has a 90-day contract on it. And from this point forward, we're going to have asbestos surveys done on every single property. So everything, regardless if it's an outhouse, doghouse, single-family home, it doesn't make any difference. We're going to do surveys on it. This all came about through a slightly different interpretation of the rules. So in the past, we just did it strictly on commercial buildings, and then we did large group of residential, but now we're going to do it on all of them. So one other thing, too, as well, is it has increased the cost of raising a single-family home. In the past, a single-family home may have cost anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000 to demolish. Now, with asbestos abatement, it can be anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. And that's not having asbestos in it either, because they have to do the asbestos survey. If the survey comes back and it is hot, meaning that there's asbestos in it, abatement has to happen then. So that contractor has to put into their bid agreement, they're going to bring in a service to do all the asbestos abatement. That's going to make the cost rise. That makes the cost rise on everything. Dumping fees of a ton of demolition is about 20 bucks, but when it's asbestos laden, it's like $90. So when they go to the dump for every ton of stuff they take, it makes the price rise dramatically. So with this, these were all at one point condemned. They all got the blue condemnation placard put on it. And then after they went under contract, in the short term under contract, they get put the imminent danger placard gets put on these. And it's a short distance between here to this. So the imminent danger placard you'll see the least of, because it's up for the shortest amount of time. It's saying that this is going to happen, this is going to go. And that is the progression through that. Now, to get to this point to being under contract, once I get all the bids back, they go to the director then signs them, makes it official that we've accepted that bid, then the inspector goes back out and he puts up the city demolition placard. When you see this red one, that means it is now under contract, that structure is going to be raised. He'll put a date on it, he'll say any point past this date, this structure is going to be taken down. So we have condemnation, which can happen everywhere. This can happen when it is imminently dangerous or it's part of the process of being raised. And then when you see the city demolition placard, that means it's under contract to be raised. The structure is going to come down. Now, one side note with the red placard, once we have it under contract, and this has happened, property owners all of a sudden show up. They didn't show up 3, 4 years, 5 years, 20 years. Now we're going to raise the structure, and they show up and they say, hey, time out, stop. I want to file a building permit, I want to fix this now. Well, that's not the case anymore. In the past, an individual could show up here, file a building permit, and say, I'm going to do this. Well, we found that that created some confusion, it created extending problems, and it kept it in the inventory of condemnation and under the process where we had to monitor it, and nothing ever happened under the building permit. So when it gets the city placard for demolition and it is under contract and that property owner shows up, the only way that they can stop it at that point is to file an injunction in court. Get an attorney, go in front of the judge then, they have to make their case to the judge saying, this doesn't have to be taken down. I'm going to speculate and say about 50% of the time when that happens, the judge does stop the demolition. Do you have a question? Behind you.
So anytime it goes to yellow, that's, like, they would require the court injunction?
No.
Okay.
Only when it's under contract.
Okay.
Once we've collected the bids, we've signed them, we have a sealed deal with one of the pre-qualified contractors, then if the property owner shows up, they have to go to court, they have to file an injunction. And it can also be, we're experiencing this right now, there's an individual living in the property. So the question was, what contractor ends up with the job? So when I put it out to bid, the pre-qualified contractors submit bids to raise the structure under the specifications I put in the bid agreement. And whatever comes in the lowest, that's the one I take. By virtue of the pre-qualified contract, they're all qualified to do the work. So whoever comes in at the lowest price gets the job. So for instance, this one 5-star came in at $75,000. And specifically with this, I do remember the bids went up to about $130,000. And this is to raise a single-family home that was a party wall to separate them. So 5-star being a pre-qualified, they were the lowest bid and responsible. They got the contract.
Just two things to jump in there to clarify. One is that the owner of the property still owns it. So we're not selling these properties to these contractors. Whoever owns it is still the owner. We're just saying that's how much the bid is, that's how much it costs to do the work. So we accept the lowest bidder.
Okay.
And then the value of that work that we did on it is placed as a lien on the property.
How long does the owner of the house have to do the injunction to court? Like, what's the time frame?
Immediate.
Immediately.
Yeah, and the goal behind that is not to make it more difficult for people. We want every house to be, that's everyone's shared goal. We'd love to see every house safe and occupied. The reason why we moved to the court injunction is because people were pulling building permits. It costs $70 to come down here and pull a building permit and then doing nothing. Which just extenuates the dangerous condition. So when it gets to where it becomes so dangerous that the city actually says, okay, we need to step in and expend our city resources on someone's private property, that means it's incredibly dangerous and we can't just allow that condition to persist. So we need someone who's, if they want to come in and change it, that's great, but show us that you're serious. Take us to court, get a court injunction. The court can order you to do certain actions within 30 days. Typically, when Mark said that they win an injunction, the court will say, okay, get a structural engineer's report in 72 hours, pull a building permit and make it safe within the next week. And then, so the person who's filing an injunction has to jump through those steps to make it safe, and then they can do the longer process of doing the building permit. So again, we can't just allow a property that might fall down and hurt someone to persist like that. Just one other note, and Mark was talking about sort of the non-linear structure of demolitions. So, as he said, something could be on the list for 20 years. Maybe it's just unoccupied, but it could just go straight to imminent danger, or straight to city demolition. Say if there's a fire, that might be an occupied home that then becomes imminently dangerous. Or, we have an odd number of cars that crash into buildings here. That's another reason why we might, just do city demolition. So it's not always a very linear process. Things can jump around from category to category depending on their unique set of circumstances. So, sorry.
So, like I was going to get into a little bit more of that. So, with the placarding system, yes, the imminently dangerous does fall into the course of action to raise it. But like Director Kennedy said, we do use that, and the fire is a good example. We do have a system that when it happens after hours or whatever the case may be, if there is a fire, inspectors go there or an on-call individual goes there, the imminent danger placard will go up there. And a lot of the structures in the past year that were fires were taken down probably within about 30 or 60 days of the event, the actual fire event. Some of them being gutted are no longer viable options to be fixed, or have became I don't know if any of you saw the one that was up on Mount Washington. There was a four-unit commercial building up there that burned, and it had to go within 7 days. So the placards went up, and it was gone within a week. So we do use them, and with that the yellow placard, we can also use that in other situations, along with like the equipment and stuff like that. So anything that produces that amount of concern, it can be used. But these are the placarding systems that we use, and I did want you to understand that, like I said, the condemnation placard does not mean that the structure is going to be raised, and it can be fixed. Where was I at? Julie, go to the raised sheet. So after we go through the actual process of raising a structure, there is a considerable amount of time after the structure's gone before it will appear on the raise sheet. When it says raised, those are structures that are gone. And part of this 3-year-long maintenance, this only goes back to about 2012, I think. And these were records that I could pull, or 2010, the records that I can pull that I'm 100% sure of what had happened there. When you see this up there, you could see a property being raised, a structure being raised, and it not appearing on this sheet for a considerable amount of time. Julie, if you go all the way to the right, right there, where it says submitted for payment, that's a kind of an internal date. So the contractor will go out, raise the structure, submit the paperwork to me, and then I have to verify things. I have to verify dump slips. I have to verify, was the property exterminated before they demolished it, and make sure that all their paperwork is in line. And once I make sure it's all paperwork is in line, that date is when that actual invoice leaves my desk. It goes to our finance administrator in the department. They put it through the accounting system, get it assigned an account number. Then it moves on to the controller's office. The controller's office also has an inspector. So the controller's office inspects now I think it's almost every single invoice. So every single invoice that goes to the controller's office to be paid, the inspector now, with mine, goes into the field and goes to that demolition site to make sure that the structure is gone. I just had the controller's office, the inspector called me the other day. We had 2 houses on a piece of property. We raised one house and the other house was there, and he got on the phone. He's like, hey, this house is still here. We're not paying this invoice. I said there was 2 houses on the property. So it's something that simple, but he stops it. Or if the contractor raises the structure and leaves his equipment sitting there. It costs a lot of money to move those big heavy machines everywhere, so if a demolition contractor's demolishing one here and he's got one 3 blocks away, he'll let the machine sit there. Some other municipalities, like for instance Baltimore has a demolition budget of about $7 million, but they also have 12,000 structures that needed to be demolished yesterday. We are nowhere near that. I had an opportunity to go down south to Memphis, Tennessee, to a conference that was kind of an overall look at cities with derelict properties, how to pull out of this and that type of thing. And some of the stories that I was hearing from these other municipalities we don't have here. Some of these places are in dire straits. From New Orleans after the floods and that type of thing, the amount of derelict buildings that they have, they're really struggling. I feel that we have a great grasp on what we're doing. We have a great vision to move forward with it. We're not struggling with funds, and we've partnered with a lot of the community groups to ask them, what do you want to have done as long as it's not reached the imminently dangerous status? I do have to be perfectly clear about that. When it gets to that point, the public or the community groups don't dictate back to us what they'd like to have kept. If something has to go, it has to go. But we have started a lot more working with community development groups to see how they wanted to approach their neighborhoods. I don't live in every single neighborhood. I don't know how people want to view their neighborhoods or how they want things to develop in their neighborhoods. It's their neighborhood. So getting that input has been an integral part of managing the inventory. But like I said, if it does reach the actual point where it has to come down, it has to come down. Every single structure has a separate bid agreement where it has specifications on it specific to that structure. But the pre-qualified contract, that 40-page document, has specifications in it that are true in every case. So when a home is raised, they got to have 4 inches of topsoil. And one thing in the new contract is we put no-mow grass in there. So they have to plant no-mow grass seeds so that we don't end up having waist-high weeds there. So it helps on the resource end for the city now that's going to end up having to maintain these properties, that the grass grows up 6-8 inches and breaks off instead of going to full boat, looking like a wild field. The controller's office, the inspector from there, is also very conscious of how that property is supposed to look. We've had cases in the past where a demolition site was taken away, perfectly level, grass was planted, and then a sinkhole appears. There's some sort of incident underground after it was buried, and the controller's office found that. So the contractor came back and resolved that issue. Because we want them to be level, grass, no rubble on top of them. And with that said, and this is a new part of the process and protocol now, in the past, a demolition permit was never filed for the city demolitions. So what we did was we moved from having specific demolition inspectors to the demolition permits being oversaw by the construction inspectors. So every single property, or every single structure now has a demolition permit on it where the city is a principal, the owner's on there, and the demolition contractor is on there. And then that permit is carried out by the construction inspectors. And they follow it. They go through. When they remove the structure, they do a void inspection. That concrete floor in the bottom there has to be fractured at a certain degree. The sidewalls have to be taken down. Certain stuff cannot be put back into that hole. And they come out there and they check off, there's your void inspection. They have a pre-demolition meeting, these construction inspectors, to take pictures of what goes on beforehand. So we take pictures of the sidewalks in case the demolition contractor breaks the sidewalk.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in. So Mark's talked a lot about how we rewrote the contract to be a lot more efficient and provide, more consistent experiences and faster experiences. And one of the big things we did was actually rewrite it to make sure that we were abating the long-term impacts of demolition as well. The previous contract was written in 1992 and really only addressed the immediate imminent danger concerns of that property. It didn't do a good job of specifying how we would leave the site to make sure that it was an attribute now for the neighborhood. So we required that it be filled with clean fill. Previously, there was no clean fill requirements for the we now require 4 inches of topsoil, so plantings and things like that can actually take root. We specify the type of seeding. We specified drainage specifications, especially a lot of these are on steeply sloped lots. We don't want to create issues for neighbors in terms of drainage. We now at times require different types of barricades to be built. Again, with elevation issues, sometimes we can create issues where you remove the structure that was actually acting as a retaining wall. So sometimes we'll build new retaining walls in some properties, and also require much better fencing and maintenance of the structure while it's underway. So again, Mark also talked about the rebuilding of the party wall. Unfortunately, sometimes we would in the past tear down a structure with an adjoining occupied structure and not rebuild the party wall. And the citizen who owned that house wouldn't have the means to rebuild it themselves. So there were programs we had to take advantage of, but it was expensive and timely, and sometimes it wouldn't happen prior to winter coming. So we really wanted to make sure that we're abating the totality of the problem, both in terms of the imminent danger of the structure, and then leaving the entire site and any attached properties in a better shape. So that is a goal. So you can actually see the revised specifications on the procurement website. You can check it out. It went from being a single page document to something that's over 40 pages long.
Yes, if you can't sleep and you need to.
it's really great. But yeah, we really, again, as Mark said, we did a best practices review of how other cities do demolition practices and what their specs are for the process. And that's how we informed our decision. So again, we're looking to not only abate the immediate dangerous matters, but also leave the property in a better condition.
So the sewer line has to be capped, and part of the invoicing when they turn it in, I have to have a slip from Allegheny County Health Department that they sent their inspector over that the water and sewer lines were capped. As far as the foundation walls, they have to be taken down below grade, and the floor has to be fractured to a certain size. It's got to be under 24 square inches. So they take their machine, they sit there and punch holes all through it so that water drains down through it. Correct, the basement floor. Yeah, so they don't take out the basement floors, but they fracture them so that water migrates through them. So there's a couple different characteristics when it comes to clean fill and what you think of clean fill. Clean fill is dictated by the EPA, what they consider clean fill. Throwing bricks back into the hole is considered clean fill. It's not going and getting topsoil and filling this giant hole up with topsoil. It's not like that. So anything that would be considered toxic does not go back in the hole, or anything considered organic that would break down. So all the wood has to come out. No wood could ever go back in because it will rot, it will create voids, and it will collapse. No plastics, no petroleum products. You can't bury tires in the hole or anything to that effect. One thing that I was a little shocked about is the EPA did change their mind on putting asphalt back into the holes. So if you have like an asphalt driveway, that can be used as fill to put into the hole, which it never was before, because ultimately asphalt is a petroleum product. So it's their rule, but the people that are doing these jobs are generally using fill right off of the lot to fill them back in. But that also is monitored. The EPA, I've had extended conversations with them. They do not go out and check voids or what's going in them. I can put in a request to them. They'll come out and they'll do like a core sample. They'll pull it out of it. But they were very adamant that they are not going to be checking that. They don't have the staff to do it, but we do monitor that pretty close. And that is also part of the pre-qualified contract. There are fill stipulations and specifications in there that they have to use.
And we do those inspections. So the EPA is not on every one of our inspection sites, but we do check to make sure every
Yeah,
site's
our inspectors
So
do
we
it.
check to make sure the void's punctured, we check to make sure the fill is clean, we check to make sure the depth of the topsoil, the grading, we check to make sure, if there's a party wall, all the pockets are filled appropriately, and that the wall is built correctly to code, and is weather tight. So the county condemnation process, the county enforces the health codes. They don't do building codes. So their condemnations are more typically for, they call it unfit is a legal definition. So where a structure doesn't have water, that's like where Mark was talking about. Typically we don't do those types of condemnations. We get the county involved because that's really governed under their plumbing and health codes.
And those kind of condemnations don't usually graduate to imminent danger. Is that sometimes the case, or?
Not typically. Those are honestly a lot more difficult cases, and it's hard to sort of make generalities about those because those are a lot of frequently very sad cases where really we're looking to connect them more with social services and maybe some utilities assistance to do that. So it's harder to sort of make generalities about those types of individual cases. Luckily, we don't see that a huge amount. The majority of vacant properties or dangerous properties we deal with are structures that were unoccupied for many years and are now in states of serious repair. So we kind of need to all work together to create an individualized plan on what is the unique set of circumstances that is causing this woman or this individual to live in this really unfortunate state, and then design a plan with social services or other agencies to sort of connect them with the things there. One other thing I wanted to point out, Julie, if you might go to the violations part. When in doubt, I would love to have people call. Lots of times I'll go to a community meeting and they're like, hey, there's a problem property in my block. I've been calling about it for years. And I'll go back and we haven't gotten a call in 3 years. So I will say, unfortunately, in the past, the city didn't always have a great record of tracking violations or keeping records of that. So if you called 5 years ago, unfortunately, we may not have a notice of that. So please check here to see if we're aware of the vacant property. And again, if you go down to filters, in case type, you can go down to property maintenance, and then that's where the some vacant properties are. So click around, you can type in an address or a neighborhood or something like that, click around and see where it is. And please let us know. I'd much rather get too many calls about a property and have to duplicate out issues or things like that, rather than not know about it.
On the condemned list, it usually bounces between anywhere from 950 to like 875, somewhere right around there. But I'm very confident about this inventory and what we have on it. Just the amount of sheer hours and work that we've put into getting this inventory under control. It is a constant work and maintenance on this, but it's an incredible resource too. Like I said, these properties are also in our permitting software, so somebody can't just come right in and file a building permit. We know that it's condemned. They have to file to abate condemnation. So we do have a working relationship between this data and moving forward with permits and developing. So.
Right, and that is one last good thing to call out. So if it is condemned, that means there's some significant structural issues that we're going to make you address first prior to you being able to do anything else. So, if it's condemned, we're going to say, okay, first we're only going to issue a building permit to fix that, and then we can issue you the permit that you want to fix your kitchen up or something like that. We're not going to issue a new kitchen remodel in a house that's, condemned. So we have safeguards in place there.
Anything else? We've run a little bit past our time, but we have the room till 11, so if you have any additional questions. I did leave cards back there at the sign-in sheet. That's my city cell phone on there. I do as well answer my desk phone, so you can call that as well. It's on there. And like I said, use this resource is on the city website. It's the best way to get this data. It's updated on a regular basis. So if you have any questions, let me know. If not, thank you all for coming.